Hey guys, it's Peyton, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in July. I read 13 books in July, and that might not seem like that much to some people, but for me, that is amazing. I have never read 13 books in 1 month. I don't even think I've read 10 books in 1 month. If I have, it's been one time. Like, I have an average of like 5 books a month. That's just what I do, and I really popped off in July. I'm just saying, like, I really did it. I did something in July. I read a whole bunch of audiobooks and physical books, and that's probably the primary reason that I was able to get so much done, because if you pair physically reading as well with audiobook reading, like, you can get so much more done. I really have been in the mood for audiobooks, so I think I'm going to be doing that a lot more in the future. I have done it like every now and then, but I really enjoy sitting back, having my eyes closed, and listening to a good book. Like, it really makes me happy. And for all those haters that think audiobooks aren't real reading, it literally has been scientifically proven that the reading comprehension in your brain is the same from listening to it or reading it with your own eyeballs. It's the same. What's the difference? No difference at all. So I'm gonna go ahead and get into the books that I read. Also, if this is a weird angle, I'm sorry. I just got this new little reading nook chair. You would know if you watch my Reading Rush vlogs. Go watch those, by the way, because I worked really hard on those. The first book that I read in July was Everything Everything by Nicola Yoon. This was a reread for me, and I reread it on audiobook, and I absolutely loved it even more than the first time that I read it, like 3 years ago. This book has such a personal connection to me in a way that for some reason I did not realize 3 years ago. It's about this girl. She is half African American and half, I think, Japanese American. I think her dad was Japanese, but he's dead. Like, he died in a car crash before she really has any memories of him, so that's why I'm like struggling to remember. But I remember that she's biracial, and she is allergic to pretty much everything. She can't go outside. She has been stuck in her house pretty much her whole life. The only people she sees is her mom and her nurse, and she's 18 now, so she's been doing this for a while. And the reason that I relate to this book so much is because I never really talk about it, but during my like 8th grade and 9th grade year, I was like super duper sick, like physically, and I had to like be homeschooled, and I was pretty much isolated for a really long time, and that led to depression and anxiety. I already had anxiety, but like it just got worse. Being isolated for so long and really only seeing your family can really get to your head. Like, I feel that even right now because freaking quarantine. It's just something I can really relate to, that lonely feeling she was feeling, and like feeling like, oh, your body is working against you. Like, it's not ever like being healthy the way that you just want it to. And I'm okay mostly now. Like, I always got a problem, like for real, I always got a problem, but I just emotionally connected to this so much more than I ever have before for some reason. And it's about a boy moving in next door, and they start to email each other because they have their windows, like they can see each other through the windows. It's just a cute romance in between them, and it just makes me so happy. I also watched the movie with Nick Robinson and Amanda Sternberg, and I freaking loved it so much. It made me so happy, and I highly recommend going to buy it because it's only like $5 on Amazon right now. So overall, like, I'm gushing about it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars if you haven't noticed. I originally gave it a 4, and I just don't know why 3 years ago I didn't realize how much I freaking connected with this character. And it's on like a even weirder level because when I was a kid, I was really sick and I had like a blood disorder, and her like sickness is described as like a issue with her blood, like with the white blood cells, and I like relate to that, and I just like, I don't understand why I didn't make that connection when I read this 3 years ago. The next book I read was A Song of Race and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. This is a YA fantasy book that I was super excited for, and I ended up not being disappointed. It was a 5 out of 5 stars for me. I literally flew through this book because I was so into it. Like, I absolutely loved it so much. The whole premise is very captivating because it follows 2 main characters, Malik or Malik, I say Malik, and Karina, Princess Karina, and they're from this country. this kingdom. Princess Karina is the princess, obviously. Her mother is recently like assassinated. She's like the only one left in her line of royalty, so she's obviously going to be becoming the queen, and she really doesn't want to be, and she's like devastated about her mother. So she comes across a thing, a curse or something that could resurrect her mother, and to do that she needs a king's heart, and she doesn't have a king lying around. And that's where Malik comes in. Malik is desperately trying to find his kidnapped sister. His sister was kidnapped by this magical being. The magical being says he will only give the sister back if he assassinates Princess Karina. So they are both trying to kill each other because Malik is going to be competing in a competition that if he wins, he will become the king. He will marry Princess Karina, and he's planning to murder her, and she's planning to murder him. And that concept is so interesting when we see them starting to interact and they're kind of catching feelings for each other, because they're so conflicted because they both know they need to murder each other, but the other person doesn't know. This is like the first in a fantasy duology. It's an all black cast, and I'm just so excited for the second one because this one set up such an interesting plot, a story, and I really loved Malik specifically because he has anxiety and you can see him having panic attacks, and I just loved seeing that representation in a fantasy book because that's hardly ever happening, and in a man. Like normally it's women that get portrayed in contemporary books with anxiety, but we got a man in freaking fantasy, and it's so awesome. Like I freaking loved this, and I think you need to read it. Like you need to read this book. The next book I read was The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I might have mispronounced that. And this I saw a lot of buzz on book Twitter. It came out like years and years ago. And the third one in the trilogy recently came out. I believe that's the final one. It just got me really excited because, you know, I can binge the whole series. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. It's a really thick book, and I actually listened to this book on audio. I will say if you're gonna do that, you might need a physical copy as well just to like see, because this book is so complex. It is technically an urban fantasy in a historical fiction setting. Like that's such a confusing explanation, but it's 18th century, and our main character Nari, she's from Cairo, which is like near Egypt, like it mentions the Nile River. She one day accidentally summons a guy, a jinn, which is like a magical fire being. He's one of the Deva. It's super confusing, but if you read this book, like you'll get explanations-ish. There's a glossary. It's so like hard to wrap your mind around. So if you're not really into fantasy, like this is an adult fantasy, so it's very complex, and it took me a lot of mind power to wrap my mind around it, and it might just be because I did the audiobook route, but it really helped to have a physical copy to follow along with because it was just a lot to wrap my head around. But overall I really enjoyed it. It just didn't give me that full 5-star feeling, but this is like a very big introduction to a really cool trilogy, I think. And it's Nari freaking finding a whole magical city that she apparently is from, but she was like separated at birth, and she and this guy named Dara, the jinn that she summoned, he is taking her there. And we also have the Prince of Davabad, which is the magical city, Alizaid Al-Qatani. I freaking love saying his name. It's like so beautiful. Like I just love the sound of that name, Alizaid Al-Qatani. Like it's so pretty. He is probably my favorite. Like I love Nari and Ali. That's his nickname. And I don't really care about Dara, which is kind of poopy because in the second book, I'm currently reading that, like Dara gets a POV. And this book, it's just Nari and Ali. And I don't really care about Dara. Don't kill me. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion or not, but I just don't give a shit about him. I'm here for Ali and Nari. Like I really kind of feel that. And they're like an enemies to friendship in this book. And in the second book, they seem to be like enemies again. And I'm hoping they become lovers is what I'm saying. Like I ship that. The next book that I read is Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Bayron. I give this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I actually read this for a reading vlog along with another book, so you can go check that out if you want more extensive feelings on this book. But I really enjoyed this book. Like just a little bit was missing to not make it a 5 stars, but this was one of those books that kept me up all night. I was reading it literally till like 5 in the morning. I was sucked in, just enthralled by how fun this book was. It is about like 200 years in the future after the story of Cinderella. Pretty much everything has gone wrong. There's an evil king who is just making sure the world is as misogynistic as possible. Every year girls of age have to go to a ball and they're pretty much bought by men to be their wives, and if they aren't bought by the men, then they are either like murdered, they are forced to work like as slaves pretty much. So you like don't want to be bought by a man, but at the same time you don't want to freaking be murdered and like made as a slave, or wherever the heck happens to the girls, they're not even entirely sure what happens to them. They just disappear. So it is about our main character, what's her name? I'm always forgetting. Sophia. She's 16. It's her year to go to the ball for the first time because they get like 2 years, I think, 2 tries, and she does not want to go. She's in love with her best friend who is a girl. So this girl, she's a lesbian. We freaking love her. I freaking lived for it. But she's in love with her best friend and they both have to go to the ball. Let's just say she comes across, I think, Cinderella's grave site that like apparently has been missing for like a while. She also comes across a girl named Constance at this grave site who is starting to tell her that maybe she doesn't really know the true story behind Cinderella, the story that we know and love. Maybe there's more behind it, because the story of Cinderella in this world has been used to freaking enslave these girls to be married to these men. Like the king just twisted it so much. I'm making this so confusing, but it's a very cute female-female romance in fantasy. The only thing I can really say that I didn't really like was how predictable it was, but at the same time, like, I was fine with it. I just guessed pretty much everything that was going to happen in this book, so that kind of took away from my full rating, but I really enjoyed it. The next book I read was The Betrothed by Kier Cass. I also did a vlog. It was the same vlog as the Cinderella is Dead vlog, and I gave this 1 star. It just sucked. It is by the same author who wrote The Selection, and that's why I wanted to read this book, because she hasn't written a book in years, and I loved the original Selection trilogy so much. Like, it had the drama, the tension between the male and the woman, and like, why did I explain it like that? It was like The Bachelor with a prince, and I freaking love The Bachelor, and I love reality shows, and I freaking love princes and princesses. It was my favorite thing ever, pretty much, growing up. Like, that was my shit. This one did not have any romantic tension. It was just like, hey, I'm in love with you randomly. Let's get married. Like, you know, like that's the vibe it gave. And I was like, what? But the basic plot line is this girl is pretty much betrothed to marry this king. She thinks it's going to be fine and dandy, but then a foreign guy from like the opposite kingdom that they're kind of in rivalry with comes to visit the king and everybody, and she starts to fall in love with him, even though there's absolutely no romantic tension in between them. The next book I read was The Sun is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. This is the start of my reading rush reads, so if you want to go watch those vlogs, you should, because I really covered everything from that whole week, but I am going to do an overview. I absolutely love this book. 5 out of 5 stars again. I actually never read this one. I did it on audiobook since I enjoyed the everything audiobook so much, and it had like the same narrators. I had like one for a guy and one for the girl, because this book has dual POV. It actually is really interesting because it kind of gives POVs from a whole bunch of random people throughout the day that Natasha and Daniel go through. And let me explain deeper on this. It's about a 1-day romance. Natasha is about to get deported back to Jamaica, which really freaking sucks because she's lived in New York most of her life and like that's her home, and you know, it's unfortunate. And she meets Daniel on her freaking last day in New York. She doesn't tell him at first that she's about to be deported because she doesn't think they're about to fall in love, but Daniel is determined to prove that people can fall in love in 1 day, and they end up going on a whole freaking adventure in 1 day, and it's an insta love situation. That's why I was worried to read this book for so long. I hate insta love, but for some reason this book snapped. Like, it snapped, and it was like everything. Like, it was everything. Oh my god, that was so cringe. I felt the romantic chemistry. I felt it, and I believe that this could happen. Like, it felt real, and that's all that I need in a romance. Like, if it feels like that could possibly happen, then yeah. And for some reason, Nicola Yoon did that. She really did that, and it was freaking fantastic. The next book that I read was Girl, Serpent, and Thorn by Melissa Basher-Doust, or Basher-Doust, I think. And this one, I originally really wanted to read because it is a fantasy book, Persian mythology inspired, and it's a female romance. And I believe it's a standalone, but low-key, I would love a sequel if she wanted to do it. I gave this book a 4 to 5 stars. I have a whole vlog for it. I really enjoyed it overall. It was a lot of fun. I read it in one day and it just swept me up. Like, I really enjoyed the mythology aspect and it just felt new. Like, it was interesting. It was about a girl who has poison in her skin. So it's kind of like Shatter Me vibes, where if she touches you, you freaking die. But she like legit has poison in her skin. She's like a snake. Like, oh my god, there's a snake. But for real. And she's lived like that her whole life. And there's like this whole story about how her mother got kidnapped or captured for a little bit by the Div. I forgot what those really are, but it's the magical beings in this book, and the Div freaking enchanted the mother and was like, your firstborn daughter is going to be poisonous, or like that's what it was, and it ended up happening. And one day her twin brother, he's like the king at this point, the twin brother gets attacked by one of the Div, and they capture the Div and put it in the dungeons. And this is the first time this has ever happened. And our main character, Soraya, she is really wanting to go freaking talk to the Div in the dungeons because she feels that they might know the secret of how to lift her poisonous curse. The freaking Div in the dungeons is a female. Enemies to lovers. Okay. Enemies to lovers. The next book I read was Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I ended up giving this book a 2 out of 5 stars. I have a vlog on it as well if you want deeper thoughts into it. But overall, this is like supposed to be a horror book. It's about a quarantined situation of girls at this school. They've been quarantined for a year and a half because there's this really weird disease that deforms their bodies, like makes them into monsters, like makes them super sick and in pain, and nobody else in the world is really helping them. They're like starving, and it's just a whole freaking bad situation. So it's kind of awkward to read it coronavirus time, like that's kind of scary. But overall, it just was really disappointing. It's also supposed to be a female romance, and I felt no chemistry between them at all, and that just disappointed me because that's what I was like really reading this book for. I felt nothing between the characters whatsoever. The actual plot was disappointing as well. Like, I don't even really understand what happened in the end. Like, it was super confusing. The next book I read was Love Creekwood by Becky Albertalli. Once again, I have a vlog on this, and this is just a novella from the Simonverse. If you don't know, like, Simonverse is the Homo sapiens agenda, and Leah on the offbeat. This is supposed to follow the relationships of Leah and Abby and Simon and Blue in email format during their first year in college. This book was actually kind of really hard for me to read because I didn't realize it was going to be like a long distance situation, and I'm currently in a long distance relationship. I've been dating him for like almost 3 years, and 1 year of that has been long distance because he's in the military. It sucks. And I'm still going through that pain, and hopefully it will be over eventually. This like freaking messed me up because I was like, oh my god, I feel what Simon and Blue are going through so freaking hard. Like, I felt those emails. That was the main reason why I was here. I don't really care about Leah and Abby. Dude, I don't really like Leah on the offbeat, and that relationship once again was just out of nowhere, and I did not feel the chemistry. But like, in the emails were kind of cute between them, but like, I was here for Simon and Blue because I actually feel the chemistry between them and they make sense to me. It hurt as a person who's in long distance relationship. It was like an emo moment for me. I have a bunch of yellow tabs, which means I relate. Like, those are my relating tabs. And I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It was enjoyable enough. I talked about it in my vlog. If this book is worth the read, you should definitely go watch that. The next book I read was War Girls by Toshiya Nobushi. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It's the first book in a sci-fi futuristic duology, I think. There's going to be a second book that comes out later this year. I really enjoyed it. It's just my main problem was connecting to all the technology in the world. Like, that was hard because this book takes place in 2172 in Nigeria. It was crazy with all the cyborgs and everything, and those, I found those cool, but I'm not really a sci-fi reader, so I would get confused at times, but overall I really enjoyed this book and I'm super excited for the second one. It's about these two sisters during a civil war in Nigeria. It's supposed to be a nod to the Biafran War in Nigeria that I think was in the 1900s. I forget specifically when that was because I literally didn't know anything about it until I read this book. So I'm really glad I read this book, and I need to like freaking get better with my history, obviously, because I don't apparently know shit. But this book was really well done in my opinion, and I really enjoyed the two sisters, but I think mostly the main thing I enjoyed was the plot. The plot was super gripping, and once I got past like page 100, I was like really into like what is gonna happen, and I'm really intrigued to see what's gonna happen. I feel like this is more of a plot-based book than a character-based book because I did like the characters, but I wasn't at the level where like I'm gonna cry if they die or anything. I'm still into this book enough. Like I would definitely want to know what happens. I also have vlogs for this. The next book I read was Felix Ever After by Kason Calendar. This one I read on audiobook. This was my final book for the reading rush. I only read half of it though. So I read 5.5 books for the reading rush. Like, I'm freaking awesome. I ended up giving this book a 5 out of 5 stars. And this book was really interesting because I was like halfway through the book and thinking like, okay, this is probably like a 4-star read because I didn't really like where the romance aspect was going. I was like thinking like, oh, this would be so much better if this book took this direction. It ended up swerving and taking the direction that I was hoping the book would take, and then it became a 5 stars. If you don't know what this book is about, it's about a black queer teenage boy. He's trans, and I don't know what that big and was. Like, that's what it's about. And it's about his coming of age story. And I will say trigger warnings for people bullying because one of the plot lines in this book was Felix is trying to figure out who is attacking him because someone in their school put a bunch of pictures of Felix before his transition and wrote his dead name on those pictures. Obviously, I feel like that would be upsetting to any trans person. Be aware of that before you read it, but I feel like it has a happy ending and it's like a full circle moment. Like I cried at the end of the book. It was really beautiful, and just overall I feel like this book is going to be such an important book for trans people and just people in general because this is going to be a good way to educate people, you know, like me, and because it's an own voices portrayal. Like it's a real person who knows what it means to be trans who wrote this, and I just think this is going to be such an important thing. Not only is the book beautiful, but the cover is beautiful as well. That just makes me so happy. Like when we get both, the book is good and the cover is good. Like we are winning. The next book I read was actually an ebook, and I'm not gonna say too much about it because I have a reading vlog coming up soon where I review 3 arcs, and this one is Skywatchers by Carrie Arkose, I think. This one comes out in August, I think like August 18th or something like that, but it's pretty soon. It is a 1950s like sci-fi book. It was pitched as similar to Stranger Things, and after reading it I do see the Stranger Things vibes, so I was very satisfied with that, and I give it a 4 to 5 stars. It is about these 4 teenagers. They are in a Skywatchers club, which is pretty much they're watching the sky to see if they're about to get bombed. It's during the Cold War, so like that's why that was happening. One day they see a strange light in the sky and they're thinking like, whoa, is this the aliens? Like for real, a few of them believe in aliens, a few of them don't. Like there's a whole debate of that. The light is really suspicious. They've never seen anything like it. None of the things they've studied look like it, and it goes overhead like the woods. So they decide to go into the woods, and let's just say they come back out of the woods several days later. They have no memory of what happened to them. One of them is still in there. They're still missing and nobody can find them. 3 of them are out. They have no memory of what happened, and let's just say it's a super interesting read. I was really into it. It was a page turner for real. I read it in like 2 days, stayed up to 5 in the morning each time. Stay tuned for my vlog when I talk about it more, but it was a lot of fun. The final book that I read in July was White Rage by Carol Anderson. If you'd watched my June wrap up, you know that I was halfway through this book and I would have finished it earlier on in this month if my freaking ebook, I had it like downloaded from my library, it expired. I didn't know it was about to expire. So when I opened the book and saw that it was gone, that freaking sucked. So I tried to put myself on the waiting list again for the book and it just wasn't happening. So I ended up buying it. I read the last bit of it. I actually read the last 80 pages on August 1st, but we're counting it for July. I was supposed to read it on July 31st, but it just didn't happen. But like, I'm counting it. This book is a super important read. It's pretty much talking about the history of racism in America. It's talking about how white people have enraged responses whenever like black people are, you know, getting their rights that they should have already freaking had. and just talking about how it still happens to this day. It just doesn't seem like people will let people live and have human rights that they should have always had. There even is an additional epilogue that she added for after Trump's election, and like just how things continue to be bad and how racism is not over. Like, it has not been eliminated, and people need to realize that, because if you don't realize that, then we can't freaking solve the problem. Pretty much, you need to realize you have white privilege if you're white, and you get things easier because you're white. And you need to realize you have that so you can work towards making the world a better place, a more equal place, a place where Black voices are listened to always and not freaking like thrown under the bed. Why was that the example? But this is a very important read. I didn't rate it because I feel really weird about rating a non-fiction book about like historical events. I don't really know how to rate a book like that. You know, I don't really want to rate a book like that. I don't have to. I just think it's an important read that everybody should read because I feel like it could teach people a lot. I will say that if you aren't familiar with American history, that this might not be the best book to jump into first, because it more so references things and then talks about reactions and just things that happened after those things happened. So if you don't like already know American history, at least a little bit, it might be confusing. So those are all the books I read in July. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know if you read any of these books or what you did read in July. If you loved the books that you read, if you hated them, let me know. I feel like I had a really good month with a bunch of like mixed reviews, some 5 stars, some 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, and 1 stars. Like, I literally had a mix of everything, but mostly things that I loved and really enjoyed. Like this video, comment down below, have a good day, please subscribe, make sure to follow all my social medias which are linked down below, and go click the bell button which is right by the subscribe button which you should have already clicked, and goodbye.